Hey everyone, this is smpratte, and today we're going to talk about liquidity in collectibles. We're also going to talk about what cards you should hold on to versus what cards you should sell immediately. I noticed in Pokemon that a lot of people perceive buying and selling as binary, as a black and white process, that generic bumper sticker advice of buy low, sell high. When in reality, understanding liquidity and what a liquid asset is really puts into perspective how buying and selling is three-dimensional, and there's more of a process to it. So in layman's terms, a liquid asset is simply something you can sell overnight that won't greatly affect the value of that asset. So if you think of a bond or a stock, $100 a share, you sell it $100 a share. The process of buying and selling is hand in hand, literally and figuratively. Where a non-liquid asset would be real estate, jewelry, artwork, collectibles, pretty much something that the process of buying and selling has a larger gap. So going from buying to selling, you think in a physical way for non-liquid is going to have a much larger gap. That gap of buying and selling is bold 72 font. That's where the risk exists. That's where the risk lives and thrives. Therefore, that is what a non-liquid asset looks like. So liquid is pretty much immediate buying and selling. Non-liquid is going to have a much larger gap because there's more of a process. It's more nuanced. So in relation to collectibles, definitely is under the umbrella of a non-liquid asset. In the most literal financial term, that is the general umbrella it's under. However, in the collectibles market, in understanding that it is a niche market, there are cards that are much more liquid than not. As usual, go to Poster Boy. Charizard, first edition base, is going to be one of the most liquid cards in Pokemon for a ton of reasons. There's so many metrics behind this card. There's so much market research, data, everything that you can point to. Since 1999, sales are hand over fist. This card's probably selling every hour, every day. It's something that's just always being bought, traded, sold, talked about, everything. The pool for its ecosystem is larger than most other cards within the hobby. It has its own identity. I mean, this thing is just it's gone above and beyond the hobby pretty much. It's flying out there with Khaleesi's dragons. It's Yu-Gi-Oh collectors want it, Magic collectors want it, sports collectors want it. Everybody knows about it. So therefore, this is going to be one of the most liquid items in the hobby. And when I say that, that means you can pretty much expect a nice, concise price range for this item, even with its specific grade. And usually if you bought that card in the past and you're selling it in the future, it's probably going to earn at least what you paid, all things considered. If there's not some terrible economic downturn, it's probably going to earn at least what you paid, if not a little bit more. Where something on the other end of the spectrum is going to be these niche English promos. Anything that's niche within a niche naturally usually has a niche buyer as well. It usually has a niche pool of consumers. So therefore, the process of buying and selling is much greater, much more abstract, and therefore it's much more speculative. You don't know what those cards are going to be worth, especially when you get to the highest echelon of cards that have a handful of copies, like those World's trophies or the Champions cards or the old school Japanese trophy cards. You're talking about stuff that has a handful of copies in existence, so therefore this process is going to be the most abstract and barely understood by most people. It's so exceedingly abstract. So that's another end of the spectrum. Niche doesn't always mean nothing. I think when people say, oh, that card is very niche within Pokemon, they think it's probably not going to sell ever. It probably won't sell as frequently as something like a first edition base card or a Shining card or a Gold Star card, but it still will probably sell at some point. And that naturally brings us into the idea of what cards you should hold on to longer versus what cards you should sell immediately. As this hobby grows, buying and selling becomes a natural avenue that a lot of people take to supplement their collection. It's something I did once I started to get doubles of cards. I was like, hang on, let me sell this one for like $20 so I can go get that other card I want for $20. That's just the natural way. They're trading cards. That's what we do. That's just what's always going to occur. So better understanding this process of buying and selling, how it's not one-dimensional, is understanding which cards you should hold on to longer and which cards you should liquidate or sell as quickly as possible. And a good way to understand this is when you're talking niche markets. Niche markets, by definition, require larger margins because their volume and their supply is much more limited. Where if you look at something on the opposite end, like a grocery store, for example, the supply is pretty much never-ending. The amount of food, water they get in stock, it should hopefully always be never-ending. Therefore, the margins are razor thin. So the contrast naturally would be, you take less supply, naturally requires the margins to be greater because I can't consistently sell Charizard First Edition's PSA 9s all day because it's a difficult acquisition, especially at a price where you can make money. It's very difficult to replicate. So you have items that you just cannot consistently sell. In contrast would be your new seal product, as long as it's in print, pretty much as you can afford. You can just get it from the distributor, sell it, rinse and repeat over and over. But keep in mind, it eventually goes out of print. But that would be one end of the spectrum where you can constantly do that, and that's why you see the high volume has the lowest margins, where the most extremely scarce, rare cards, valuable cards are the most valuable because the margins are so insanely high because there's only a handful of them. BGS 10 Charizard, Pikachu Illustrator, even the PSA 10 first edition Charizard, the old school trophy cards, all these cards have massive margins because the quantity is so limited. So if you treat these items that are, some of them one of a kind or once of a lifetime purchases, if you treat them like your new sealed product and you just throw them out the door, you better make sure you said goodbye to it because it's probably not going to return. It's probably not going to come back. And, I think this process is obvious for that stuff way up there in the clouds, but let's bring it down a little bit to like gold stars and things like that. I think people thought, for the longest time that these gold stars would always be in Japan, ungraded mint, and I could just buy them, grade them, flip them, right? That's what a lot of people did. What happened? Supply ran out. Why? Because we know the print for those cards. We know they're estimated 1 in 72 or 1 in 108 packs. We know there's some of the rarest and now scarcest set cards in existence, so therefore that's not a consistent supply. So if you treat that like a consistent supply and flip it and throw it out the door, you're going to have a bad time. That's not a sustainable business model. To be sustainable in this hobby, you have to understand the range of liquidity. You have to understand that these cards are liquid, but also that three-dimensional understanding is that within that liquidity understanding, with understanding Charizard is this liquid, you also have to take into consideration how many of these cards can I buy? Sure, something like a new seal product is liquid and it has that consistent supply. Where something like this Charizard is also liquid, but it doesn't have that consistent supply. So if you're banking on consistently always having PSA 9, 8, 10, whatever, WotC cards available, you're gonna have a bad time. You'll ride that wave, you'll get a nice tan, the girls will look at you, you'll be fit, but once that wave goes down, so does the business model. So basically, businesses have to diversify. This is why when a buyer goes to a big brick and mortar store, why they're offering you 50 to 60% on market is because that niche market requires massive margins. If you have a collection that you believe is worth $20,000, if you piece it out on eBay, a business is not going to give you $20,000. They're probably not even going to give you $15,000. They're probably going to give you somewhere between $10,000 and $11,000 because they're going to have to go through all of that and find out which ones are the home runs and which ones are the poopers. And they're going to have to figure out, okay, which one of these can I sell immediately that's going to be liquid? And if it is liquid, if it is something that's readily, easily to sell, it has a nice quantifiable fair market value, can I consistently get this in stock? How many of these are you selling to me? Then you have your obscure promos that don't have sales data. And then you have cards that have never sold before or they're lower end and it's tough to move them. So you get the picture. It's diverse, it's nuanced, and you have to layer it. And if you don't focus on the layer, if you treat all of this the same, you're probably not going to have any growth. I know guys who have been in this hobby as long as me, some even a little bit longer, and they have not adjusted their rolling capital or grown their collection because they didn't adapt and treat the cards that were one of a kind as truly one of a kind cards, and the cards that you could buy all day from your distributor, as something different. If you fail to make that distinction, if you fail to separate what you can get in stock in a consistent way, it's going to hurt you in the long term. Also as a collector, if you're a collector who is on the fence, like, should I buy this now or is it going to increase in price? If you can get these cards in hand, it's over. It's over. Whether or not that price increases or decreases, bird in the hand is the ultimate truth in any hobby, any collectible. So as the collector, if you are able to, if you want to sell your card quickly, don't put yourself in a position where if you want to get that card back at some time for less, it's probably not going to happen if it's something that's very rare, scarce, etc. So keep that in mind when you make that purchase. Make sure it's worth it to you to sell that card at that price with the understanding that you probably won't get it back with that price. Of course, there's a lot of other cards you can. It's like a boomerang. It'll come back around at some point. But gold stars, shinings, that's more mid to high tier, I guess. That type of stuff, you cannot treat that as a permanent price point. It will change. So hopefully that helps the buying thing. One other little tidbit I want to throw in there is I get approached somewhat frequently from people who want me to buy their collections. I know larger stores, this is probably not even just a weekly, probably a daily occurrence for larger stores. And again, if you're frustrated with the margins they're offering you, consider your other options. What is it then? What's your other option? as an individual right now, the best option is to just have a business buy you out if you don't have time, or do a consignment deal with someone like PWCC. And, you know, if you're still frustrated that, oh, well, they're taking a percentage or whatever it is, then the only other option is then compete. You know, I think one of the strangest things in Pokemon to me is that people fail to understand that we're competing. You know, it's like if you go to a gym, okay, and a guy's benching 300 and you can only bench 150. How do you bench more than him? You know, do you bench more than him? But do you claim he did steroids? Do you claim he's a liar? No, you compete with that. If you really want to achieve that and compete with that dude, if you want to be the guy who has the hardest shot in hockey, who can jump higher than anyone else in basketball, how do you achieve that goal? You have to compete. So something like PWCC is a great example. If you want to compete and have the premiums that PWCC earns, then do what they did. You know, consistently sell at the highest level possible and have a just phenomenal business structure and have a great brand because of hard work and merit for 5 years consistently, and you'll probably earn those premiums. But otherwise, it might not happen. Maybe it might not happen. So that's just another little bonus point there. You know, when you're understanding the market and not only just liquidity and understanding market value, buying and selling, you know, that process of buying and selling, again, is three-dimensional. You really have to look at all parts of the cube. You have to say, okay, part of it is, you know, how much am I competing? How much have I established myself? You know, how consistent am I? How quickly do I ship? You know, how concise am I in my listing? How well do I understand the market? There's some guys out there, and I've messaged some of them through E4 who are sharp as hell. They don't have the $1 million inventory, but how they handle their items is so sharp. They're just sniping it every time. There's optimal answer. And it's just that the point of that is you don't have to be the monopoly guy with infinite deep pockets. You can be the guy who could spend maybe, you know, even $10,000 a year at most. At most. You could be that and still compete. You could be half that if you wanted to. So it's just about understanding which cards you have to really understand. Can I get this again in a consistent way? I can't hammer that home any harder. You know, that's my secret to success, if you will, is treating the cards that should be in a museum as cards that should be in a museum. Don't listen to anyone else who says otherwise. If you have a card that's an old school trophy card, that's a first edition PSA 10 Charizard, and anyone else chirps to you and says, that shouldn't be worth this, it does not matter. There's no words that change the fact of what that card is. It's self-evident. So treat that card like it should be treated. Give it the royal treatment. Let it, you know, give it the presidential suite. Let it chill in the jacuzzi for a while. Make sure that case is waterproof. But at the end of the day, that's my advice, is to treat your best of the best items that you own as just that, and don't try to throw them out the door. You know, if you need money quick, hustle. Get a part-time job. Put out the cards that you can get back. I see so many people who get frustrated with the hobby that throw stuff out the door because they thought, oh yeah, I could just get this again in Japan. No, it disappears. You know, anything that has any type of rarity, scarcity, or whatever to an elevated level of being niche is inherently going to have less supply. That's why you got to focus on those margins, the reality of the supply versus margins. So hopefully this ranting towards the end here gives you just a better idea again about that three-dimensional understanding of buying and selling in this hobby. Liquidity is one aspect, but also if you can get that on a consistent basis is the other aspect. Again, Charizard is pretty much a liquid item in this hobby, but you can't get it on a consistent basis. So therefore, don't treat that as sealed product where it is also liquid, but you can get it on a consistent basis. Because obviously the margins are different, the supply is different. So hopefully that ties all in. As usual, guys, let me know your thoughts. That's pretty much everything I have. And yeah, until next time.